At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order.
Oh, I know.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Doherty.
Here.
Commissioner Gerda.
Here.
Commissioner Lehman.
Here.
Commissioner Strack.
Yes.
Commissioner Sabota.
Here.
Commissioner Thacker.
Here.
Commissioner Walsh.
Here. Thank you, Dorothy. At this time, I would normally call the public input portion of the meeting, but there is no presentation in the gallery tonight, so we will skip the public portion of the meeting. Next item on the agenda is item number 5, consideration of approval of the meeting minutes dated, May 15th, 2019's regular meeting. If there are any questions or concerns from commissioners, please speak now. Otherwise, I'd be looking for a motion.
Motion?
Commissioner Walsh, do I have a second? Second. Commissioner Thacker on a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Sabota.
Yes.
Commissioner Strack.
Yes.
Commissioner Lehman.
Yes.
Commissioner Gerda.
Yes.
Commissioner Doherty.
Yes.
Commissioner Thacker.
Yes.
Commissioner Walsh.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Excellent. Thank you, Dorothy. At this time, I would like to open file Z950. The applicant for this file is the City of McHenry. The requested action is consideration of a recommendation for text amendments to the City of McHenry zoning ordinance, including Article 3. Boy, I guess I need to bring my readers in next time. General district regulations, age operations, and enclosed buildings dealing with outdoor seating. And at this time, I would like to turn it over to, thank you, Doug. We do have the public notice, the certificate from the Northwest Herald for the notice of publication for that public hearing. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Doug.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 2015, the city adopted an amendment to the zoning ordinances for outdoor seating, and many businesses have taken advantage of that. And the purpose of the amendment was to allow outdoor seating and put it in the zoning ordinance to facilitate outdoor seating, so to make it easier for businesses. So they didn't have to always come to planning and zoning or go through a process. And these days, if you're a restaurant, you don't have outdoor seating, they say you're not going to be successful. And you know, I've read that, I've heard that, and I truly believe that. But more than just restaurants have outdoor seating. But recently, a couple places have come up that I've spoken with that have wanted to do with outdoor seating and have been a little bit taken aback, but that they wanted to serve alcohol or serve food, and I said you have to go to planning and zoning, and you have to pay a $950 fee, and you have to go through this process and notify people. And not that that's a bad thing or but, and certainly is warranted in many cases. But with the outdoor seating, we've taken many cases before the Planning and Zoning Commission, and pretty much when alcohol is involved, we have the same recommendation that it be enclosed with a barrier or some kind of stanchion or something like that. So I thought about how can we make it easier for businesses that may want to serve food or have people eat outside, or maybe serve alcohol or have people drink alcohol outside, but still protect the integrity of the ordinance, and maybe not have to go to Planning and Zoning Commission. So here's what I came up with. And in many of these cases, it's one or two tables. It's not a lot of tables. So there's two provisions of the ordinance which I've included in the staff report that I'm proposing be looked at for amendment. And one of them is preparation and service of food preparation and service of food outside is prohibited. So that's prohibited right now without coming before the Planning and Zoning Commission. And the other one is service and consumption of alcohol outside is prohibited. So those are the two that I'm looking at amending. And what I'm proposing is language you see in your staff report on page 3. And I won't read it, I'm sure you've read it. Basically, it gives the building commissioner, which they end up inspecting the outdoor seating for anybody who has outdoor seating, permission to have outdoor seating with basically that same provision, that it's enclosed and that they go through the inside area to get to the outside area, or in the alternative, they go through a hostess or host station. So it's controlled. So I took this language from another community. I didn't make this up. And this would allow businesses to serve food and alcohol outside without seeking a conditional use permit. And it's the same kind of condition that I often recommend for businesses that want to serve food or alcohol outside. So I'm just trying to simplify the process and trying to make it easier for businesses. So my recommendation is to delete the provisions. Preparation and service of food outside is prohibited, and service and consumption of alcohol outside is prohibited, and replace it with the paragraph that you see in your staff report. And be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Excellent, thank you, Doug. Just before I turn it over to the commissioners for discussion, so in the language change that you're proposing, the process that the applicant would go through, they wouldn't come here. Instead, they would have to be following the same building code that they would, if they had come here and been approved, they would then take it to the building department to get that approval, but the requirements from the building department aren't changing at all. The only thing is just not coming with a recommendation from us.
Correct. They would have to meet the same requirements from the building department that they would
In the previous form.
Exactly.
Got it. I just wanted to make sure that all the commissioners were clear. So the process itself for getting the approval to do it doesn't change. It saves the time and effort of having to come in front of this commission when I already probably have a restaurant that has all of these provisions met. Instead, I'm saving $950 and a couple of months worth of time to get on the agenda. But the okay, if you will, would only be coming as a recommendation from us anyway to council or to the building department anyway, and they're gonna have to follow all the same guidelines. So I just wanted to clarify that before I turned it over, and at this time I'll roll down to Commissioner Gerda.
I'm gonna take the Hub Market as an example. Use some tables out there right now. Tables were put out, so I guess there was really no requirement out for the tables to go out, or nothing special had to be approved for the tables to be out there, but they cannot serve alcohol there.
There can't be any alcohol, and actually, they can't serve food out there as well, and they can't have alcohol outside.
Okay.
I'm gonna guess that they're not serving anyone out there?
I don't
I'm gonna guess
believe
they're
so.
self-service tables.
So it's like
Would that-
self-service.
would
So
that
in
be an
a case
accurate
like this,
description?
Correct. The only thing that they could do is maybe take something outside, because you can't serve food outside, but with alcohol it's different. You can't
Yeah,
consume
that's-
it or serve it.
so I guess I'm just kind of, and I know that's gonna go in front of the building, not us, but the barriers or gates, forget Hub Market, look at looking at any other, restaurant that may be on Green Street. They're gonna run into, they're gonna be landlocked, I guess is the term I'm using here, or thinking, so they don't have any room for barriers, gates, so that might be a little bit on the difficult side to I guess to get to get a permit to do that, I guess, or to be able to serve alcohol and food out there.
Most of them, I think, yeah, but there's not a lot of them, but like Buddy's
Buddy's
has a
has it.
barrier,
Jexel's.
Jexel's has a nice area, DC Cobb's, I think, has a,
That's gated as well. So
Yeah.
I guess the question is, Doug, to Art's question is, if there's tables outside, for example, at Hub Market today, but Hub is not serving those people. There's just tables in front of the restaurant that are outside on the sidewalk,
Mhm.
and there's no service being done. Is there a requirement for them to come to this or the building commission if there's no service being done?
There's no requirement to come before this board if you meet all the other conditions of the outside seating. So they're not in any violation or anything like that. I do know that they had talked about, that alley in between, which is part of the theater, that possibly if they got permission from the theater owners and they did something there, I understand Art's point, they would have to be creative. This language is a little bit, it's a little bit flexible in terms of what you have to do and, to meet the requirement.
So Doug, can I ask a question on that? If I got, you know when you go to a concert or you go somewhere, they have the retractable
Yes.
style
Yes.
designator where the posts are out and they pull the nylon cord in between the posts. Would that count as a barrier?
That's exactly what I was thinking of when I was talking like that. I was thinking about that kind of thing. That could be facilitating access. Now, they can't have it through I don't think they can do it through directly through a door either. So that's why there has to be some type of, that's why I like this, there has to be some type of alternative, like a host or hostess station. So to answer your question, that's a judgment call. So shall be subject to review by the building commissioner, shall be secure, permanent nature, and shall facilitate access in the area only through the licensed premises, or through an occupied host or hostess station. You know,
So if we removed permanent nature or changed the permanent nature to something, whether it be temporary, whether it be however we verbalize that, that could allow them to use something other than a permanent, like we were talking about with the pylons, with the corded.
You could bring it every night or for winter.
Right, for the winter months, you could take it down. If there was sidewalk sales going on and you weren't gonna utilize that space, then you could remove it.
you just take out the word permanent,
Right, and that would probably,
just of a secure nature.
Art, what are your thoughts on that?
That would work, and I guess I'm just, bringing this up, because, trying to make things easier on businesses, and
Yeah.
if in a case where you still have all those, other requirements, hostess, the door and all that, if a building or a business is, landlocked, they don't have room on the side like a park by DC Cobb's or all the sidewalk by Buddy's, and that's the area that's happening right now.
Most prevalent, yeah.
And people will, I've witnessed that actually. People had walked out because they could not bring their beverage outside. They packed up and left. So you gotta have that in order to survive. That's absolutely correct. But you need to, maybe that change right there would, if you take out permanent from the wording, that might make it easier, or might, allow them to achieve, being able to get that. If that makes any sense. Sorry, I'm just rambling now
No,
here.
it's all good, sure.
Not saying that anyone is in any violation or anything like that. That's not where I'm going with this, but
Sure.
I'm just using that as an example for ease of getting this permit and being able to do so.
Excellent. Commissioner Sabota?
Instead of like taking out permanent, why don't you just add like permanent or temporary partition? Cause it can be permanent, right, if you want to put permanent.
Well, I think if it's just a secure nature, you kind of cover both.
I don't think like that rope line kind of thing is like.
I mean, so the way I respond to that, how many of these places have you been by where the gates are open?
All of them.
That's
a wagon at a time.
I mean, so I guess, I mean, I'm just trying to, I mean, to Art's point, I'm trying to, you know, I wanna make something that makes sense, but I don't wanna be overly restrictive and then end up making something that is unenforceable. You know, I'm trying to find a happy medium, I guess.
I'm trying to find something more like all encompassing in that.
Juxels, let's say, and having, for lack of a better phrase, ropes or,
Sure.
you know, I want the businesses to thrive, but I would prefer something that's, you know, more eye pleasing or whatever.
Sure.
As well.
No, I think it's great, everybody has more outside activity, I mean, it's just, you know.
So go ahead, Jim, to Art's point.
So if I'm a business owner and I put out tables and chairs, but I don't serve, I don't have to come to this commission, right? Or building commission or anybody, right?
As long as you meet all these
Right.
conditions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
But I have to take them in at night? too?
Well, if it's on public
Yeah.
property.
if it's
Yeah.
on public property. yeah.
Okay.
They do that, I think, they've done it for a couple of years anyway, I think at Jimmy John's, they put tables out there, of course you
Right.
purchase
walk
the
outside,
food,
sure.
you go outside, you eat it, and they bring it in at night, I believe. I think Starbucks did that too.
Starbucks is enclosed now, and the new
Yeah.
location.
Yeah, at the old location, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry for jumping in, you guys.
No, it's all good. Commissioner Sabota, your comment was the last thing on the table about the conversation of should we be permanent and temporary?
I was trying to make it more flexible, I don't wanna be more restrictive. I
Got
don't know
it.
if that was helping or hurting, so
Got it.
I'll leave it up to you.
Well, I'm going to move down the table to, actually, I'll jump back to this side since we're flipping back and forth. Commissioner Lehman, what are your thoughts, sir?
Okay, nothing.
Commissioner Walsh?
No, but
Commissioner Thacker?
No, so far so good.
Commissioner Doherty?
So, why not service to the table, you know, if someone buys a hamburger and a pop or something like that? Why, is it such a big deal, like a little chef or something like that they do bring it out there?
Well, I don't think it is. I think when you first write an ordinance, you get a little restrictive because you don't know what's gonna happen. So maybe you're a little bit more prohibitive, but now I don't think it's a big deal. I think you wanna promote, you want your businesses to have that flexibility and you want them to be successful. I don't think it's a big
Right.
deal.
Why not bring the whole thing around and just say no alcohol being brought out there and leave the rest wide open? Because I think, you know, the newer businesses that have the ability to have private property, they have a place to put it. But you go into a place like Green Street Cafe, or you go to, some of those places that have no place to put an outside table, other than in front of their building on the public right of way. What's wrong if they put a table out there that has a little weight to it and, you know, a couple chairs? I don't know if that's such a big deal.
Well, I think the way the change is written, though, I think that does eliminate the fact of, I was just looking at that as you were saying that, Commissioner Doherty, preparation of food service outside is prohibited, service and consumption of alcohol. So the preparation and service of food outside would be removed from what we're making the text amendment to. So that would allow for more flexibility in that to be done.
When I read preparation, I thought that was cooking.
Well, that would be, but
It
the
is
service is
serving.
the next point.
It is
It's,
serving.
it's preparation and service is what's currently listed as prohibited, but now Doug's recommendation is to remove that completely. So if, for example, some small business had tables out front, they could serve to it, but the way we have it laid out is there's supposed to be a barrier. So the real question I think that you're presenting is, do we need to have a barrier in those locations?
Correct. The newer ones, it's not a big deal. Like, what was that the other night at DC Cops? They have that, I saw where it says that exit sign. I was like, that's kind of weird to have that exit sign up above like that.
And then was it going out the back?
It's going out the back and the front. But it's just like an exit sign, like you'd have inside of a building, that showed you that that was the exit.
Well, I think the reason that it's up there like that at Cobb's is because the roof is louvered, and when it's closed, it's considered covered space. So the building code
Okay.
probably requires them to
I
have a
thought
lit
that
sign
was
up
an
there.
exit sign, okay. Yeah, so other than that, let's see. I just had something about the umbrellas in the wind. Maybe we'd add umbrellas in there, cause sometimes they, if they're not fastened down, they can fly.
That is addressed, it has to do.
It says other items, but I think maybe. if we
Is
put
that in the building
umbrellas
code
in there,
checklist?
right next to the chairs or something like that might be helpful. Cause those would blow away way before a chair
Other
or a
items.
table.
P,
Oh, here it is.
publicly secured in case of high winds.
And then, it looks like O also. Oh, they're calling out umbrellas for not blocking signage in driveways and intersections. So yeah, it must be.
Umbrellas, I had it on, page 2, item P is in Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it would be covered under related items.
Okay.
We might wanna,
We can't put umbrellas.
we might wanna add umbrella to that list, just to make it crystal clear. Thank you, Commissioner Doherty. Any
That's
other
all.
questions at the moment?
No, that's it right now.
Excellent. So to circle back to the conversation on this particular item, it seems like the topic of conversation is, do we need the barrier moving forward on some of these locations, or don't we? And would that barrier be permanent or temporary? Commissioner Gerda's point of, does it need to be so restrictive that we have a permanent nature? It sounds like Commissioner Sabota's point was the same, that it might not need to be as permanent as that. Any other commissioners have questions or concerns, please speak now. Commissioner Walsh.
On page 3 is where it says, and replace the following at the bottom, is that replacing the top? Or?
That's replacing preparation and service of food and outside is prohibited. Service and consumption of alcohol outside is prohibited.
It's the same amendment from the previous page, Commissioner Walsh, it's just restated.
It's just-
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So it's the
It's
actual,
with the
the
removal of those.
recommendation. So over here is
Gotcha.
the staff analysis with it, and then the
Yeah.
recommendation below it, so it's just listed twice.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. Commissioner Thacker, any questions, concerns, comments?
No, I'd like it to be, you know, friendly toward the businesses, and I realize they all can't be permanent, barriers, you know, so, it's not a perfect world, but as long as they have something that would signify that there's some kind of a boundary or whatever.
Doug, can I ask, what's your opinion? I mean, we looked at this, we looked at this text from another municipality or other municipalities as a whole, but what does your gut tell you? I mean, you've been involved in this kind of stuff for a long time. We rely on your expertise. And again, we've taken this text from a couple other places, but what is your thought just initially on, if we didn't have a permanent
I,
structure, do you think it lessens
I
the
think,
safety aspect or anything else?
I think the more progressive communities, you're not gonna see barriers. You're gonna see people outside enjoying drinks, enjoying food, and, you know, and that's just part of the community. You know, you can delete permanent, and then you can delete and shall facilitate access in the area through the licensed premises or through an occupied host or hostess station. I mean, and that would probably solve the problem. I personally, that's the way I would like to see it written,
Less restrictive.
less restrictive. I think the barriers are just psychological barriers, if you will.
Well, and as stated previously, the question was how many times do you see the gates open in
Yeah.
those locations? I mean, it's not really a barrier when it's not being utilized that way.
Exactly, and I was, you know, sort of saying that tongue in cheek, but that's kind of, I kind of meant to, you
Yeah,
know,
it's literal.
yeah.
I was in Austin recently, and you know, you walk the Austin area, and whether you're in the downtown, you know, the more prevalent downtown areas, or even off the beaten path, they have no barrier. You can be sitting pretty much right on a major highway on the sidewalk having lunch, and cars are zinging by you at 50 miles an hour. So I think in the past, we always looked at the barrier as being something that was a safety concern. In some of these instances, depending on where the locations were, I think we always looked at the permanent structure as something that was gonna retain people from getting in and, you know, God forbid something happened where a car, you know, intervened with that area. Boy, I don't know that we can protect that. Whether those pylons were in place or not isn't really gonna matter much.
You know, I think a lot of them, even thinking back to, years back in Crystal Lake, it was Genovesi's was the
Sure.
restaurant. And they started having the outside, and they had to more or less put a barrier, because people didn't know when they were just coming in, sitting down,
Right.
and
Which is
I
why.
think that's a big thing, why businesses do have it, to prevent that, you know, you have to go past the hostess or go inside.
Well, and that's why I won't, that's where I was leading the conversation, Roger. You know, Doug had mentioned removing the hostess station from that, but I don't know that that's the best fit. Because what happens if you're gonna allow it and then everyone just comes and sits down? There's no
control.
There's no control
Yeah.
over that
Yeah.
access. But if you remove the barrier, people are just going to sit down anyway, so now
Right.
you've taken that control away anyway.
Wasn't there for lack of a better word, situation a summer or two ago over in Woodstock? There was something about wanting to have, it had to do with outdoor seating, but they had to do it out on the sidewalk. It was over in Woodstock. They wanted to do it because other businesses on the square were able to do it. I can't remember.
So I will tell you, I was just over there recently, and the rear of those buildings that are near the theater, so if you're where DC Cobb's Woodstock location is, if you were to go out the rear of that building towards the railroad tracks, they built, I don't know if the city built them or if they were built by the businesses, but there are platforms that are built like decks with pergolas over the top, with tables built in. They're removable. They actually put them in the parallel parking spots and the diagonal parking spots for the summer months. So those businesses can utilize that outdoor space during the summer months. They lose a little bit of parking. Those people have to walk another block to park.
Mhm.
But all of those businesses then have access to be able to use that for the summer months, and then they get removed and stored during the winter months. I just don't know who facilitated the cost of that. But yes, I mean, it's very much less restrictive even in that sense. They're even taking parking away to allow the outdoor seating.
Yeah.
Right? Doug, I mean, that's.
I like
that's
that
what-
idea that they do over there.
They go park lots.
So, on that same note, you know, we're up in Waukesha all the time. Daughter goes to college up there, and you know, very often we end up going out for lunch or whatnot. Their downtown area, I don't know what's all involved in it. I didn't ask, but their downtown area, just about every restaurant, bar, whatnot, they have seating outside on the sidewalk.
No barrier.
No barrier, that's the other thing, no barrier whatsoever. And again, I don't know what was involved in permitting process or any of that, but, you know, go in, grab, you know, order your food, they'll bring it to you, they'll bring you your drinks, you know, your dog would do whatever, it's all,
Right.
you're sitting outside on the sidewalk, on, you know, their tables, and I'm assuming, cause they're all different, so, but it's very loose, I guess I'm gonna say, it's not, doesn't seem like you're restricted or anything like that, it's very friendly.
So what happens to like those tables in the winter time when you go up there? If they're on public, I would say that if it's on public property, they, maybe for the winter, they should be taken off.
Well, when it's cold, I don't go out, you know, I'm not looking to go and sit outside, so I can't
'Cause
say.
that was my
But-
kind of
But
next
I'm guessing that they're gone. I'm, in all honesty, I'm guessing that they are gone during the
Yeah,
winter
you're
months.
right.
Because, you know, they're brought in, whether it's basement storage, whatever. But they're doing this summer, or when it's warm outside, when people wanna use it, when they wanna be outside and enjoy the atmosphere.
I'm sorry, Doug, do you remember what item number that is that we addressed that? On the list of, it is in there, is it not, or is that?
Oh, R?
R is the.
Oh, R is the one we were
R is the
discussing.
one, yes.
Okay, so that's the one that calls that out.
P addresses the high wind thing.
Right. And I believe we're going to add umbrellas on
Yeah,
that P
like
as
that.
well.
Right.
So, what if we change the verbiage of R to remove during the, not time, but
Off-season.
off-season, that it's not being utilized, so that those were cleared during that time? Because if we're not gonna affix permanent barriers around the perimeter of that area, then they could just remove them when they're not being used in those off times.
So like off-season hours?
Correct.
Yeah, sure. You do that. Off-season hours.
Whenever that would be.
Yeah.
Probably after the
Well,
parade.
June when it's snowing.
What is it, that parade or December, what is it, December sixth, what's
Toys
the?
for Tots or?
The Christmas.
Christmas
Oh, yeah,
parade?
yeah.
Maybe after that,
Well, the interesting thing is.
just St. Patrick's weekend.
Well, the interesting thing is if it's been removed and they wanna put them out, maybe there's a downtown event happening.
But that'd be a good time to, you know, that end is at that parade, and then maybe a week before St. Patrick's Day or something.
You got off-season hours, okay.
Cause then everything's cleared and they don't have this much snow on the tables when you're driving down the street.
Sure.
What's our winter parking restrictions on the streets, is it December, or, like when the snow is, the signs that talk about snow removal, I guess that's what I'm looking for.
It's based on snow.
It's based on
amount.
snow.
Is it just?
It's not
snow?
time.
It's not like Chicago, that's
No.
December first.
We don't designate the month, we only designate how much snow we get.
So I mean, off-season, I guess would be probably good wording to use there. I mean, if it's cold outside, people are not gonna wanna bring the tables in, clear the sidewalks. I mean, that would be my recommendation on that.
Commissioner Walsh?
I just don't, how would you enforce that?
Well,
You
I
know what
don't-
I'm
I
saying,
don't-
like, who's gonna enforce?
Well, I
It's
think if
off-season,
you,
no, it's not.
well, I think if you don't put it in there though, we have no way to go back
Right.
and enforce it. If there's 10 feet of snow piled up on tables and we can't clear public sidewalk, then at least we have something to go back on.
Yeah.
That's my only concern about not having it.
Right.
It provides some flexibility.
We have to have, it provides flexibility, but it also provides enforcement on the other side of it.
Right.
Right, cause if it was a bench or something, it's not a big deal, but if the table and the chairs.
Right, if our parks guys are clearing Green Street and they can't do that, we wanna be able to enforce that at some point in time if needed. But I can't imagine anybody who's invested in tables are just gonna want them out there in the winter months because it's gonna damage the tables anyway. Even wrought iron's gonna lose its paint if they leave it out, so. Any other questions or concerns from commissioners before I review the changes we made?
On page 1I, it says about hard surfaces, you know, that you can have it on hard surfaces. But, you know, some of these that were coming up was like, if the surface isn't level, you know, cause like in front of the nut store, they were gonna put tables, I know, at one time, and,
They leveled it though.
but now it's level.
Right.
But I don't know if we wanna, you know, if there's other areas that are not level, you know, that someone could dump back and hit their head on, if it's, the slope isn't correct.
Thoughts, comments, commissioners?
I'd rather see it just on a hard surface. If there was an area that they owned and
I think that
there wasn't a hard surface there, put one in.
if it's a dangerous spot, or, I think the business owner would notice that, adjust or whatever he's gonna
Right.
do.
Well, and if they're adding the hard surface, I would hope that anybody who's putting the hard surface in would make it level.
Yeah.
Right.
Or we'd notice it.
Well, and that's probably, I'm gonna guess it might be on the building conditions as well. Any other comments from the other side of the table?
Hopefully no one's putting tables on a 15-degree,
Yes.
Well, you've seen it before.
I've seen it, I'm like, oh boy.
I know exactly what Joe's talking about. All right, Commissioner Doherty.
That's it.
That's it? Any other questions or concerns? So before we move anything forward on this, I would just like to reiterate the change we made on item P. We've added umbrellas, so tables, chairs, umbrellas, and other related items. I'm just looking to confirm with the clerk that she has that change as well.
Item P to include the word, are you just,
So we'll edit item P to be tables, chairs, umbrellas, and other related items, if that's okay with everybody.
Yes.
And then I'm gonna let Doug give you the other two. Or is it just one more?
Item R,
The change in item R?
yeah.
The off-season change in item R?
Off-season, during off-season hours.
during off-season hours period, or off-season hours every
Just-
year?
Just adding the word off-season before hours.
Okay. And leaving in that it is not, and taking off that it is not being utilized. No? Yes?
I would, if you leave.
So let me
off-
read it back to you.
Off-season.
How about if I read it back to you? Let me just verify.
R, yes, please.
Did anything, so amending item P to tables, chairs, umbrellas, and other related items utilized in conjunction with an outdoor seating area shall be appropriately secured in the case of high winds.
Correct.
And amending item R to read, outdoor seating on public property must be removed during off-season hours. Or during off-season hours that it is not being utilized, which,
Do we wanna leave that is not being utilized? I think that's the key for enforcement in the
Yeah.
off-season.
I would,
I would-
if you have the word hours in there, I would read it as you can leave it there during business, even though if it's off-season, that you can leave it outside during business hours. If you have the word hours in there.
So would you like to see hours removed,
Yes,
Commissioner Gerda?
yes, I would suggest that we, during off-season, when it's not being utilized.
During the off-season.
off-season.
Yeah.
During the off-season when it's not being utilized.
So let me read that back for the other commissioners. So item R would be amended to outdoor seating on public property must be removed during off-season that is not
During the off-season.
When
during
it is
the
not being
off-season,
utilized.
when it is not being utilized. Agreement from commissioners on that language change in item R. Excellent. And lastly, are we in agreement that we would remove the word permanent from the text amendment? And I will read that just so that there we have clarification. The building commissioner may grant permission for the sale, dispensing, and consumption of alcoholic liquor and or food in an outdoor area adjacent to the licensed building. Except as provided herein, the area for which permission is issued shall be subject to review by the building commissioner and shall be of secure nature and shall facilitate access in the areas through the licensed premises or through the occupied host or hostess station. I'm gonna break there for a second. So that says that you don't have to have a separate host or hostess station, that you can facilitate the outside seating through your normal entry of business.
Is that what everybody wants?
Or do we want that removed as well?
I would say that the way you said it, that you can go through your regular entry should remain that way, because again, that goes to the restriction of what if we didn't build a building, then we have a separate entrance. We don't have the ability to have that because of restrictions.
Is everybody in agreement with that? I think it covers both instances. They can have a separate host or hostess station, or they can facilitate it through the normal entry and exit of their building.
I'd prefer to have it that way.
Okay. I'm gonna continue reading. Additional exits with latchable gates may be required to facilitate emergency egress from the premises. Said additional exits shall be self-closing and latchable gates and doors approved by the city and marked by signs stating emergency exit only. My comments and concerns from commissioners sounds like all of that would be removed.
And understanding that says may be required.
Right.
Oh.
It is not required, but if necessary, then that would be enforced or, by the building commissioner at that point.
So let's play devil's advocate. I apply and it says may. Where do we clarify who needs it and who doesn't?
Well, that would be the building commissioner's choice.
Okay. So just thinking that forward.
I'm the building commissioner.
Today we have a building commissioner who sees that one way. 5 years from now, we have a building commissioner who sees that another way. Not that we can't make another text amendment 5 years from now. I just want to make sure that we're very clear on what we send to council right now.
I understand what you're saying.
I checked with, legal for the simple fact, unfortunately, we do live in a sue-happy society, and what if something came into play where you had to use those exits in an emergency, and they weren't marked?
But they're gonna go back to the building code.
And that would be laid out in there then.
But my question is, Roger, if we remove the barrier restriction, if we're going to take that out, now there is no issue.
Right.
We don't have an exit
right,
issue anymore.
Right.
So the question becomes, do we leave the structure in place where we need to have this marked access?
I think if you're gonna have the barrier, you're gonna have to have it marked.
And it would fall back to building code. So I mean, currently, I believe our code is all with that language in it.
Okay.
Correct? Do you even know off the top of your head?
It's gonna cover it. Yeah, I mean, I'm kinda with you, Sean. I'd almost take this part out. It seems almost too discretionary.
I agree.
So if there's a new, let's see, someone comes in for a permit and they would like to, let's say, they have a great big building and a great big parking lot, and they wanted to have some tables outside, maybe 12, and they had plenty of room. They can just have that wide open if we leave it loose like this, or?
If we remove the barrier, yeah.
So,
I mean, it would still have to go to the building department, and the building inspector would actually have to approve that. So there is still a layer of, there's a layer of approval, it just doesn't fall here.
yeah.
It falls on the building department.
It falls really nice for the small, quaint little places. I'm just saying if a bigger establishment with a large parking lot, a large building does come in wanting that, there would be no requirement for a fence.
Correct. If we pull.
Okay,
Most of the conversation at the table thus far has been that we don't need a barrier,
correct.
which
And I
would
was all
fall
for
for
that
anyone.
until I thought of
Well,
this.
and
One
that's a good,
instance.
and that's a good point, though, that is a very good point, but,
Because I was thinking like the old Busy Bee building, you know, something like that they wanted outside, something out there, you know, across from the liquor store.
Mhm.
Sure.
and I guess my point on the barrier was so more for areas on the sidewalk.
Right.
Not necessarily a parking lot to where, you know, where, yeah, a car can, well, not that a, you know, wrought iron fence is gonna stop a car from driving through and hitting a table,
Right.
so.
So what if we left the barrier as a requirement only on private property?
I either.
Now we have a legal issue?
I still
Well,
think
I
those
either go one
barriers
way or
are
the
more
other.
for the benefit of the establishment, so people just don't come in and
Right.
grab a table, that's.
Yeah,
They're
and-
gonna
and-
put them up or not.
Well, right, and they may choose to do it anyway.
Right. I think you gotta go one way or the other.
If it wasn't required and they chose to do so, knock yourself out.
So, probably is lenient.
Well, I think, again, it falls back to the building inspector. If the building inspector feels that there's an issue there, then I think the building inspector is going to say, hey, this is a concern, and address that. It just doesn't fall to our written, the current text would be different than it is today, but it still will fall to the building inspector to be able to make the determination after the fact.
I like that.
And then, the liability issue, and that probably falls on the property owner if it's in a parking lot,
Correct.
more so
Yeah,
than
sure.
the city.
And he's still gonna have to be insured.
Sure. Okay.
So there's a couple layers of. So does that
So
mean
right
we're
now,
pulling that?
so right now, it still falls with the BC, the building commissioner, right?
Correct,
Even the way we have it written today.
correct.
Yeah.
So they would give the yay or nay anyway.
Mhm.
Right.
So without it, they would still give the yay or nay anyway.
The only difference today is that they come to P and Z
Right.
for
But
approval
we're
and
gonna
it's a
change it.
recommendation for that. Instead, they would go directly to
Right, the BC,
the building commissioner direct.
right.
There's an application process as well, the checklist that Dorothy mentioned earlier, those things.
And the building commissioner has her own guidelines.
Correct. And building code as well.
I will need that whole paragraph read
Right.
again, just.
Yeah, sure. So, let me just ask one more time, because I don't think we're totally all in agreement. Are we removing additional exits with latchable gates may be required to facilitate emergency egress from the premises? Said additional exits shall be self-closing with latchable gates and doors approved by the city and marked by signs stating emergency exit only. Please realize that says may. We can either completely remove it, we can bold the word may. We have some options, but what it sounds like to me at the table is that everybody's vote is to pull that 100%.
Doug, does the building commissioner look at us as a filibuster to like stop some of these, or they don't really care, they just go whatever?
No.
Yeah, okay.
I like leaving it up to the building commissioner and just wiping the whole thing out.
Right. That's what I
Would
feel.
that be your recommendation as well,
Yeah.
then? Pulling that and just leaving it to the.
I think I would pull it.
I see head shaking. Do I have any?
Well, it's left up to building code.
Correct. Code and the commissioner, both.
Right, he's gotta enforce that.
Do I have any no's? All right, Dorothy, give me just 1 second and I'm gonna read that back to you. Dorothy, I'm going to read to you what the new text amendment would be, replacing the two items proposed. The preparation and service of food outside is prohibited and service and consumption of alcohol outside is prohibited. We would be replacing that with the building commissioner may grant permission for the sale, dispensing, and consumption of alcoholic liquor and or food in an outdoor area adjacent to the licensed building. Except as provided herein, the area for which permission is issued shall be subject to review by the building commissioner and shall be of a secure nature and shall facilitate access in the area through the licensed premises or through an occupied host or hostess station, period.
That's it.
Okay.
Exactly. So commissioners, just a review before I get a motion, we would be looking for, yes, the changes on item P, adding umbrellas, item R, adding off-season, removing the word hours. So that would read, outdoor seating on public property must be removed during off-season when it is not being utilized.
The off-season.
The off-season, like the.
Do we wanna put any dates on that or no?
That varies.
After the Christmas parade and before St. Patrick's Day?
Just when it's not being used.
It's not gonna snow, is it?
You don't know.
You could predict that.
Yeah.
Well, so, I mean,
Cause you kinda.
I mowed my yard twice in
When's the
snow,
off-season?
so
I mean, you know, anyone can say, well, my off-season is, you know?
We want
You
it,
gotta
a little
see more.
ambiguity.
yeah, I think leaving it loose is key, but
Okay.
being able to enforce is the option. Anyone else with Commissioner Doherty? I'm happy to explore this option, but it sounds like Commissioner Doherty's the only one who thinks we need a date on it. I'm sorry, Joe.
No, that's fine. Keep it loose.
Well, should have council been.
Would you like?
Yeah.
the entire-
Yeah.
Would you like me to
Yeah.
read the entire thing for the motion?
You want Dorothy to read the motion?
I would.
Yeah, Dorothy, you're not talking about actually reading the outdoor seating ordinance. You're just
No.
talking about the recommendation, correct?
Correct.
So we're kind of changing the outdoor seating items we're changing as well, right?
I'm amending so I can read the whole thing if you'd like.
Yeah, so the amendments to that and then the actual text amendment for what we're replacing would be great, just for clarification.
So
Are you-
the motion,
Are you including the Mr. Third item?
yes,
Okay.
so, yes. So the motion would be to recommend deletion of the following provision in Article 3, General District Regulations, Section H, operations within enclosed buildings, outdoor seating. Preparation and service of food outside is prohibited, and service and consumption of alcohol outside is prohibited. And replace with the following as amended. The building commissioner may grant permission for the sale, dispensing, and consumption of alcoholic liquor and/or food in an outdoor area adjacent to the licensed building. Except as provided herein, the area for which permission is issued shall be subject to review by the building commissioner and shall be of a secure nature and shall facilitate access in the area only through the licensed premises or through an occupied host or hostess station. And to recommend amending item P from tables, chairs, and other related items utilized in conjunction with an outdoor seating area shall be appropriately secured in the case of high winds, to tables, chairs, umbrellas, and other related items utilized in conjunction with an outdoor seating area shall be appropriately secured in the case of high winds. And amending item R from outdoor seating on public property must be removed during hours that it is not being utilized, to outdoor seating on public property must be removed during the off-season when it is not being utilized.
Do I have a motion on Dorothy's? I'll make that motion. Text. Commissioner Lehman on the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Gerda on a second. Any other additional questions or concerns before I have the clerk call the roll? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Walsh.
Yes.
Commissioner Thacker.
Yes.
Commissioner Sabota.
Yes.
Commissioner Strack.
Yes.
Commissioner Lehman.
Yes.
Commissioner Gerda.
Yes.
Commissioner Doherty.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Excellent, thank you, Dorothy.
Good job, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to close file Z950. At this time, I would like to open item 7 on the agenda, the discussion of various amendments and updates to the comprehensive plan and development policies of the City of McHenry's future land use map, with a focus on the historical areas. And at this time, I would turn it over to Doug.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two things. One, there's a map. I know it's not the best map. I worked with HR Green on this. Basically, the shaded areas on the map that you have in front of you, Main Street, Green Street, and Riverside Drive, and a little bit of Elm Street. If you remember when we were going through the comprehensive plan process, we said that we were gonna look and designate areas around the downtown areas that were historic in nature, not in a historic district, but historic in nature. Meaning that they're older part of town, they have some historic buildings on them. So I took a shot at determining what areas these may be. We can talk about that. The Main Street areas were basically, long time ago we proposed a historic district. That's kind of what I used for that. They should extend all the way to Front Street going from Main Street. I don't know why that doesn't extend. But some of the areas you may say, well, I know that property, why it's not historic. Some areas are shaded because of contiguity, because they're around the same area that is of an historic nature. And some areas are just, I wasn't sure where to start and where to stop. Like, if you go up Green Street, you go up to the cemetery, or, we can talk about that, of what other people's opinions are. The second thing is, I put in here the design guidelines for residential teardowns and infill parcels. And I guess I put those in here for when a property, there's some infill lots in here, meaning that there may be vacant lots, and there's some guidelines on how lots should be built on in older areas. And are these appropriate guidelines that you think could be utilized for areas such as this historic area that we're looking at? Or are these not the guidelines that you're imagining? So that's why I include these. I kind of wanted your feedback on those. So the goal would be to kind of determine what part of the city around this general area is quote-unquote historic, and put that on the comprehensive plan. And then when something comes forward, maybe for some sort of zoning action, we can go, oh, that's in our historic area, and then we have guidelines and we know it's in our historic area because we've designated it as such. So with that, I know it's kind of a real general explanation. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
This topic will probably end up being like the last topic, where we have lots of general conversation. So at this time, we'll just do our best not to talk over each other, and maybe throw a hand up when you have a question, so that we're not talking over each other. But we can start at the other end of the table this time with Commissioner Jordy. Do you have anything?
So maybe you wanna start with like Main Street and work our way this way?
Sure.
So I was thinking well, first of all, what are we gonna do with this? I mean, is it gonna be a guideline for zoning? If someone comes in and says, well, the lumberyard. So it was historic at one time, but someone wants to put up an apartment building, I think that's a great idea. And they shouldn't have any restrictions, because that Walgreens is right there, and that dry skiller building, those aren't historic, either one of those. Or the auto tech, but that mill building across the street is.
Well, first of all, this is non-regulatory, so this is not gonna have restrictions. This is sort of these are just gonna be guidelines. You're correct in that, it's not gonna be, well, it's part of our historic area, so we can't touch that property. That's not what we're proposing here.
I think the intent is, if there's an infill lot, for example, on Waukegan, there's a vacant lot for sale on Waukegan. The house on one side of that vacant lot was built at the turn of the century. The house on the other side was probably built in the 20s. If someone wants to put up a modern contemporary house in between those two houses, we would rather it look period specific on the way that architectural design of that house would be done. The particular property that you just mentioned happens to be a commercial corner front, probably isn't gonna fit either of these criteria. But I think at the end of the day, we'd like to make sure that if there's a historic district that has historic valued homes and we'd like to not restrict that lot, but we would like to emphasize the fact that it would be great if the infill lot that was gonna be built on was like and characteristic of what the adjacent properties would be. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to
That's,
put it.
that's simple, okay.
Yeah.
I think that's the intent of what we're looking to do.
So in a case like that, should, like say, the lumberyard, should that be historic in your view? Or should it be non-historic?
I think it's commercial, so it probably doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't matter.
And I think that's a good question. So should we wipe out all and this is kind of a rhetorical question, but at the same time, it's a question for the commission. Should we wipe out all the commercial properties and just have residential properties? That's a question for you to decide, you know.
So let me pose it to you this way, Joe, because this is something that has come up a couple of times. A gentleman in town owns the old City Hall building on Green Street. At one point in time, there was intention of building some large commercial, or some commercial space along with residential space there. The original plan that was discussed looked just like Landmark. But would he be required to build it to look like Landmark? Because it's a commercial district, we're C4 downtown business. That's the question becomes for what we're talking about tonight. Does it really apply for residential, or does it apply across the board? If we wanted to put up a building that didn't look anything like Landmark on that site, I don't think anyone would complain because it's commercial. But if I were a homeowner on a street in a historic district and somebody wanted to put a different style house up in between a whole bunch of historic homes, now
Exactly
I
right.
might have a different opinion.
Yeah.
So that's a great question for the commission. Does it fit? Commissioner Gerda?
So here's a question, well, I shouldn't say I know, I'm pretty sure that one of the houses that's, off of Main Street, it's actually the one that's right next to the apartment building that's on, Main Street and Front Street.
Mm-hmm.
Cliff owns the house, older
Nice.
gentleman. I'm pretty sure I was here in a council meeting many years ago, and there was some discussion about, I think, a similar topic, and his house, I guess, is or was zoned commercial, but it is a residence that he lives in. So if we exclude
Right.
commercial and
It's a slippery slope.
very
Commissioner
slippery,
Gerda.
very slippery. You do have residential, you have homes that are zoned commercial in that area too.
Well, and it's interesting because if you look at the homes on the north side of Route 31 on that stretch of 31 north of 120, on
Yeah.
both the east and west side, the west side properties are all mostly historic homes. On the east side, they're a mix. But some of those homes are businesses on the west side of the road. I know that there's an attorney's office there. There's some other items that will probably continue to convert into that style use. Doug, am I wrong? Are those properties zoned commercial, or are those currently, if I were on the west side of Route 31 just south of the cemetery, is that commercial or is that residential?
I think those are, I think they're residential, not pilot. I know there's a mix, there's
Right.
a couple that
Yeah.
are zoned commercial, but there's some that are zoned residential.
I think the commercial ones, if I'm not mistaken, are they all north of Maple? And then everything
I don't-
south of Maple,
One of them
like
is-
Pat Wertz, that's all
Yeah,
residential.
I think the only person,
The
I'm guessing
lawyer-
that the lawyer
Yeah,
just
the
came in
lawyer.
and got a change in that. Cause it's been a long while, but it's just an example that I wanted to throw out there, is that you could have a residential area that you also have some commercial availability on as it changes. And again, this document can change as well. This is today's version, and we might, my goal would be to look at this annually again as well, and as times change, we continue to change that as well.
It's almost well, if you look out, everyone talks about, west on 120, where, Lakeland Park and all of that, where along 120, you had a lot of those houses which became commercial
Sure.
businesses.
And we have changed zoning there to all commercial.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it's all commercial.
That is all commercial, yeah. So I guess the topic runs twofold. Doug, if it's okay with you, I'm gonna jump forward a little bit into the infill lot and some of the restrictions that are in the tear down, because I think it comes into play at what we're talking about. If you would go to page, looks like page 7 of the, actually, you know what, let's go page 6 of the tear down committee guidelines. And this is kind of where this comes into play, at why we're looking at this, is if you look at the site considerations on page 6, the design characteristics is trying to figure out how to keep that design somewhat the same. And I think it's interesting when you look at building setbacks and side load garages and things, that you can make a new building look like that. So the whole reason that, and Doug, jump in here if I'm wrong, but the whole reason that this was put into play in 2005 was because we were having a pretty big influx in building in 2005. And then of course, late 2007, all of that stopped. As the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission, I am on the tear down committee. I have been to one meeting for one property in the time that I've been involved in planning and zoning, which is a few years now. So we don't really use these guidelines very often because building wasn't really happening, but I think we're on the influx of some things happening, and now's the time to really address this kind of stuff. So there are some explanations of what a tear down property is and what an infill lot is. And I think some of the setbacks and some of the things that we've seen come across our desk here come into play at those same things. We just had a garage change that came in front of us last month. Some of those types of things are the same types of deals. Historic area, different layouts, different buildings. The reason we look at giving a variance on something is because we were, and for example, in that case, we were putting vehicles inside instead of leaving them outside, improving the characteristics of the community. This is designed for the same thing. The question becomes, how do we take the two of these documents and really create maybe one? Or we have a tear down committee guideline, but then we also have this historic area that kind of flows from the same set of guidelines, in my opinion. Is that accurate, then?
Yeah.
So maybe if you bounce through the tear down committee guidelines and you have any specific questions, Doug's here for us to ask, but I think ultimately, as you flip through the tear down and infill lot guidelines, you can see the site considerations are, the new structure that you're going to put up should really reference the old properties as well, using an average of setbacks if the setbacks on the street are different. If the lot that you're building on, for example, in a tear down, maybe you bought the lot next door and you're looking to put a new structure up. If you can configure the structure to look so that it has appropriate design characteristics and it doesn't deter what is already in place, is the key. On page 8, there's a good example of what a new home might look at to try to make it look familiar with the other homes on the street as well. Hiding a side load entry garage behind the home instead of out front. So in looking at those design characteristics and then flipping back to the historical aspect of what we're talking about, you know, does this kind of fill in that same area? And do you have any recommendations for changes or questions or concerns for Doug while he's here?
You know, I hate to say it, but like in the residential, it's almost like you have to look at each one individually.
For sure.
You know, on the, you were talking about Route 31, Richmond Road on the west side. It was maybe a couple of years ago, I can't remember if it was a remodel or what. Pretty close to Pat Works' house, and I think the house is for sale.
Right.
But the gentleman did a really nice job. He
Yeah.
put that porch out front and all that, and he did
Great design to make it match.
He did a really, really nice job, I thought, you know, so something like, and I don't know if he came to the city or not, but it fit in beautifully, I thought, you know, with the homes around it, or what you just referenced over in Waukegan. I know where you're talking about. Yeah, you'd want to see somebody put something in that fit in there, but I think it's almost like a case by case.
Well, and that's what the
scenario.
tear down commission, or the guidelines for the tear down committee was really that. It's just a case by case basis, each one of them separate. But I think if we earmark a little bit of this historic district as well, again, we don't wanna make it too restrictive, but we want
Right.
people to be aware that, hey, if you're gonna build in this area, let's try to keep it within that guideline. And I think the building department's probably doing a good job at steering people in that direction as well.
I know I think they're still having trouble in Glencoe. I know it's not a fair comparison, but they were getting the smaller homes in Glencoe were
For
being
sure.
purchased, we're gonna tear them down, and then they were gonna.
McMansions, we're back to that.
Exactly, yeah.
For sure. Well, I think in purpose of the conversation tonight is to talk about how we do we lay these historical district, like Doug has it on the map now? Do we remove the commercial, or do we leave them both in there and just leave it on a case-by-case basis? Do we not make a historic district at all? I mean, that's really Doug's question, is what do you want us to do with it? I mean, I think it would be nice to have some of this earmarked as something that we can have
Well,
just.
like on Main Street, the city's always talked about Main Street, and it's, you know, you got some kind of neat old buildings on Main Street.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you know, the last thing that I can remember just recently, you know, they didn't want the business going into that one building. Whether you favored it or didn't favor it, you know, that was.
Right.
But those are neat buildings if you could do something with them.
Absolutely. So I think that's a great point, though, Roger. You've got a building that's been there for quite some time. I don't know if I'd call it a historic building, but it definitely fits in the historic district right there.
It fits in the era of.
For sure.
You know, when it was built, all of them were built, and then there's only maybe so many things that could go into that building. And, you know, that one there, it was tattoos, everyone, even once before that.
Yeah, it's been many
We
bike
could-
shop. It's
We
been-
could do a broad paintbrush, kind of the area, and then just pick out certain buildings, you know, that were.
Well, I think
you
what
know,
Doug.
rehabable, cause you're not gonna rehab some of those, old frame ones, I don't think.
Well, I think what Doug has on the list is kind of that, is really just a brushstroke of what that historic district looked like. It's.
But would you wanna put it, the lumberyard and that type of thing in any sort of historic thing, if some guy comes in and says, well, I'd like to build like right here, oh, that's in a historical area, so you don't even wanna confuse the issue with that, would you?
I wouldn't personally, I wouldn't even consider that part of a historical area there.
The mill across the street is, but
But
that's
the
kind of
mill
its
is,
own,
yeah.
that's kind of its own little deal.
That's in its
because,
own little area right
Cause
there.
that pizza place next to it, that's not historical, and neither is any, that's kind of its own deal right there.
Right. Yeah.
So from the train station coming that way, I think we're good with historic. You know, going towards Christopher's or Main Street in front.
So Doug, that is the train tracks on the map you gave us, right?
Yes.
I would have to agree with that, I think, going.
From the tracks.
train
From the
tracks
tracks
east,
east, from the
yes.
tracks east, yeah, west, I mean, you're talking, well, the old lumber yard and, you got the corner right there at 120 Crystal Lake Road.
Most of those are-
Somebody buys that and weighs a few bucks at Danny Umbarger and. No, I'm serious, and you could, you know.
It could be different as well.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Do you wanna use like character of the area? I mean, cause
Yeah.
that's a broader stroke, you know?
Sure.
It's not so much a classification, whether residential or commercial, but because we have these little pockets, so it would be the character of that area.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't wanna alter that too much,
Right.
so.
That's kind of why some of these properties are gonna be quote-unquote historic and some aren't going to be historic.
Right, I mean, if a building's already been, you know, maybe something burned, and when it was rebuilt, it wasn't rebuilt to that character, but yet it really still sits in that area.
Right,
There's nothing we can do about that now.
right.
So I think it's going to be pocketed pretty heavy.
So if, we use that, lumberyard again. So if someone wanted to come in and build an apartment building, we would want it to look more like the one at Green and Waukegan than the one up by North Fox.
Well, we're saying that we don't care what it looks like, because it would be a commercial property that's more of a retail type on both of those frontages. I think everybody's point was that particular property might not be a historical nature.
That's a tough property there.
So we're saying
Do
from
we
the
wanna
train
tell-
tracks, we're saying from the train tracks east is more historical.
Correct.
So what's on, cause that's west of the tracks,
So it's,
probably really doesn't matter.
yeah, okay, I agree.
Someone wants to buy it and do something with it, please let them.
Exactly.
Right.
So then, as we look east from there though, so we have Main Street, Third, Waukegan, that area, then we run up Green, you know, up to Washington, that whole area, some of Elm Street, most of Riverside Drive. Venice, I don't really think fits that criteria. I think Elm Street's questionable whether it's historic, it's just gonna depend. You've got the corner of Riverside Drive and 120 that's pretty historic. And then you've got a building across the street that was historic and been rebuilt 4 times. But I think the rest of the map though, Doug, I think with the way it's laid out now would definitely fit that criteria. Is there anything that would need to be added where we would need to extend a little further?
Is there any, there are vacant lots, you know this, on Riverside Drive on the east side, on Riverside? All those lots are pretty much filled up, aren't they? I mean, the last one was that huge house, I think, that was built.
Right, I don't think there's any, currently there's no vacant land that's marked.
Because on the west side, it's all the older, nice
Right,
looking homes.
Yeah, so Riverside, and I think we're earmarked that way, probably not. I think we have a mixture of those homes when you get deeper north on Riverside Drive.
Yeah.
Should we run Riverside Drive to Washington?
There's only that one on the corner, right? The one on the northwest court and Riverside, just that one house there.
Well, I think it's a big mix on Riverside as well.
Yeah,
You know, you've got some old, some new,
Mhm.
right.
Well, you might be able to go to that, but that would be about it.
just to Washington,
Yeah.
right? Cause that's that's really the last stop. There is a couple of historicals after that, but there's
Yeah.
also some newer home in there
Right.
as well. Does that make sense? Should we run that just to Washington?
Go up to Washington's.
You know, the city and the merchants, I think, on Riverside Drive. That's nice. I think
Mhm.
they've done a nice job.
Yeah.
there. Real nice job.
And Doug, so I'm aging myself a little, I'm gonna have to borrow Jim's glasses here in a second. but-
These are 1.5.
This Elm Street area, this looks like two colors, is it just because the underlay was red underneath there?
I think so. I think that's why that.
It is a different, I'm
Yeah,
a
it
little
is.
bit colorblind, so
Yeah,
that
it
doesn't
is.
help me. But there, it's because it was red under there, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's got red stripes.
Yeah.
I was like, is
There's
is
some
that a
yellow
different
ones
color,
there.
or are we designating two different ones or one?
I don't know why, they are all highlighted as being, supposing to be highlighted, but
Okay,
I don't
got
know
it.
why.
Any other changes or concerns on this historical thing that we're going to let Doug run with? What do you need from us tonight, Doug? A motion to,
No, I just,
so you're just gonna push that
Is that
onto
both-
the map panel?
is that both sides of that road?
Did they ever have, I keep meaning to ask this, it kind of off subject, but the, what they built there at Pearl Street and, Richmond Road, the apartment, did they ever have like an open house or, anything?
They're gonna.
I would've liked to see the inside of that.
I
that
think they're
finished
gonna have
product.
something.
Are they?
I think so.
So we're gonna extend this up Riverside, and we're taking out west of the tracks.
Yeah.
Perfect. So you don't need you don't need a formal for that, cause that's
No.
really just something we're gonna
No.
earmark internally.
Yeah, and I'll bring it back.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions on the tear down items? Does that look like, everybody's still in agreement with what those are, and should we formally, maybe at another meeting, formally actually
Yeah, take a
move
look
that
at it
as a
and-
new date? If all the commissioners would maybe just take a peek at that, the tear down commission guidelines, and then I'll have Doug put it on the agenda for next time for us to just kind of maybe finalize that, if there's any changes that need to happen, and we can newly date that item so that it is current.
You would probably know this from the real estate. As an example, on, Riverside Drive on the river, I'm trying to think where it would be. It's after the really big house, Nick Krause's house, just a few houses up. It was an old greenhouse that it got bought for taxes, if I remember right, just recently. That's city, correct?
Those are mixed, not everybody there is city.
Yeah,
You know,
it's-
Krause's old house is not in the city.
Because my question would be is, if this house was city, somebody wanted to tear it down, and
It would have to come to us.
it would have to come to us. Okay.
But if it's county, they won't have any say.
Right.
Unless they want to hook city sewer and water, then there would be an annexation agreement. Then we might get a say.
Yeah, it was bought for back taxes, but I don't know if it's, I don't know what the condition is, I have no idea.
Yeah. Moving on to item 8 on the agenda, Doug, do you have a staff report for us?
We're gonna have a special meeting July 10th. Thank you everyone for getting back to me, appreciate it. It's just, we have a bunch of variances for Patriot Estates. I'll get into it more at that time. And then we have a meeting July 17th. That's all I have.
Excellent. Anything from the commissioners for staff?
I had a question on the tear downs,
Mhm.
McHenry Savings Bank and Mark Houston's old facility, what exactly, is it going to be parking or is?
No idea. I'm hearing that
Still
maybe a
private
new
property.
building. Yeah,
Really?
It's not ours.
Savings Bank owns them.
They own both properties?
Yep.
Wow.
I think they were nudged to remove one of those buildings.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens next.
Yeah, we better.
Yeah. Any other questions, concerns? Looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Commissioner Thacker, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Lehman on a second. Anyone opposed? Meeting is adjourned.